Well, hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graban, and we're joined today by Jonathon Hensley. He is a co founder, he is the CEO, and he's also Chief Creative Officer for Emerge Interactive, where he works with clients to transform business strategies, user needs, and new technologies into valuable products and experiences. And he's also the author of a book that's going to be out this fall called Alignment. So we'll have a chance to explore that a little bit. Jonathon, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. And you always like to sort of jump right into it and ask you to tell your story about something you would consider to be your favorite mistake.
Yeah, so one of my favorite mistakes that I made very early in my career and has been continuing to, I'm still learning lessons from, is the mistake of confusing goals for having a clear direction and a strategy in whether it be personal or in life going forward. And I think goals are touted as this thing, especially as a young, professional, as an entrepreneur. When you, as you've got to set goals, you've got to have, something that you are reaching for. And goals are fantastic. And I set goals all the time, personal and professional goals.
Mhm.
But I think what is missing in a lot of the conversation around goals is that they do not provide clear, cohesive vision for where you're going and how you're going to get there. And so I think that's really been impactful. And I early on in my career, I really learned that the hard way with clients. Seeing that both working inside organizations and as well as providing services to whether it be a startup or Fortune 500 company, that goals were being mistaken as strategy and clarity in these projects that we were working on, coming from senior leaders, with decades of more experience than myself. And, I was really leaning on them for those expertise to make sure that we were successful. And some of those projects were huge failures and really painful to overcome as a team, and were setbacks personally for myself, and then and even for my company, as I became an entrepreneur and built an organization myself. So I really have come to understand that goals are not enough, and I've really tried to apply that now for as I go forward, and personally and professionally.
Mhm. Yeah. Is there a specific example that you can think of without naming names or anything of one of those projects where the goal maybe was compelling, but as you were saying, there wasn't a clear enough path for getting there? Can you help kind of bring that to
Yeah,
life
I
a little bit?
I think, there was one particular project. This is for a global manufacturing company. We had been given a very ambitious project, which everybody was really excited. It brought all the different passions of the organization together. We had the digital team, the design team, brand. We had, the manufacturing and innovation groups involved. It was really exciting work. And what happened is because we had goals were being interpreted differently by different functions of the business and different team members, and it wasn't cohesive. The goals were counter to some of the mandates of some of these other parts of the organization. And so with that confusion, that the goal was being seen as a strategy and not understanding that it wasn't answering all of these really critical questions that we all needed as part of the team. And so you started to see expectations being mismanaged, deadlines, not being met, conflict between groups across the company, tons and tons of rework happening, trying to catch up, and everybody with the best intention. And it was just the cost of that project to come to fruition, which it eventually did. And even though the outward external, deliverables of that were successful, I would consider that project a significant failure. It was a failure in leadership. It broke down in communication, and it probably cost 5 to 10 times what it should have.
Gosh.
And that is not an uncommon story, as I've learned going forward. Lucky enough for me, I had the opportunity to experience that fairly early in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very eye-opening lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And it was easy there was a lot of, through the process, there was a lot of politics, a lot of blaming, people trying to kind of shield themselves because it wasn't going in a good direction. But no one really stopped to say, well, what is this goal? We were all looking to that next level of leadership. And since becoming, someone in that senior level leadership now myself,
Mm-hmm.
over the last, several years, I've come to understand even more now how important that lesson was and how difficult it is to overcome that confusion.
Yeah. So I think it's nice and clear the way you're sort of laying out, the goals and then the direction or the path for getting there. An example that comes to mind, I work a lot in healthcare. An organization might have a really important goal, such as zero patient harm. That goal, without a clear set of steps forward, runs a risk of just becoming a slogan, or without a path for making progress toward that goal, people can get demoralized, if not cynical, about goals like that. Is that kind of repeating back an example that kind of matches your framework?
I think that's spot on. I had a mentor who articulated that, a lot of times goals have very little substance behind them, but they have great intention. And I think being able to shift into focusing on substance and really being honest about what it's going to take to achieve that goal, what obstacles you need to overcome, and that consistency that has to be developed. I mean, it's a muscle, it's a discipline, like anything else. And I do a fair amount of work in healthcare as well, and so I think that's a perfect analogy. The do no harm, or to see situations where where there's always this mantra in healthcare of, well, it's all about the patient. A lot of times there's a lot of behavior that is not aligned with patient outcomes.
Right.
And so, if that is truly your intention and goal, you need to start putting the substance behind that. And that's a harsh thing to say, but I can say that as a professional and as a, at a personal level, having, spent, a fair amount of time in and out of medical institutions, at all levels, supporting, family and friends. So I've seen it on both sides, and it's really critical, especially in healthcare now, that they focus on that, because there's the efficacy of and care of their patients is going to be impacted dramatically by understanding that difference.
Yeah. So one follow-up question I wanted to ask you, one of our themes here on the podcast is learning from mistakes. And so in your work, working with clients of Emerge Interactive, how have you taken the lessons learned from, as you described, a project that might have been 5 to 10x more expensive than it needed to be? How do you incorporate those lessons learned in setting up current projects to avoid that problem?
Sure. I think the first and foremost is really making sure that you don't skip the due diligence of mapping the current state. And what I mean by that is, understanding, really diagnosing the problem that you're trying to solve in the project, really understanding what's the approach that you're going to take to solving that problem, in a unique and sustainable way that allows you to continue successfully into the future, and what are the actions that need to take place. And I don't mean like minutia of like, what are all the steps, A, B, C, D. I'm talking about what are the, areas of focus, the domains of action that have to happen in order to move forward as an organization. When any one of those things gets skipped, I see that projects are already set up to not be successful. So we really focus, and lessons learned from that lesson of goals are not enough, that we step back and really make sure that we're clear. Okay, well, beyond the goal, what's behind it? What do we need to be accounting for? And when you say a goal too, I think, one thing that's really interesting is it's with stakeholders, in a project of any size or type, we find the way people interpret success of achieving that goal or how to approach that goal in the context of that is really mission critical. Mm-hmm. So we really step back from the very first meeting and we go, okay, what's your interpretation of this goal and what does success look like, 12 to 18 months from now? And then we anchor that to the mission of the company and we make sure it's aligned to the actions that they're looking to take going forward. If that's not in place, we know we can't move forward until it is.
And I can imagine, from what I've seen in my experiences working with clients, there's often a challenge where a client is in a rush to accomplish something. And the time spent, as you were saying, defining the current state, mapping out current processes and defining the problem statement and doing stakeholder analysis and all of that can take time that people sometimes feel like, they can't afford. So I'm curious, wondering how you perhaps address that, the need to do the due diligence, as you put it, versus the urgency to solve the problem. I'm reminded of, there's a Toyota expression, go slow to go fast. Mm-hmm. And so the one thing I've been taught, and I think I've learned, is doing that due diligence, while it slows things down in the beginning, it allows for much greater acceleration when it's time to move forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I always really focus on the question of what's the impact of if this fails. Mm-hmm. I think there's just this kind of fundamental question that you have to ask a stakeholder when they're trying to go fast. What's the cost of failure? Mm-hmm. If there's little to no cost, then, they're not going to probably be willing to pump the brakes a little bit and slow down and really go through the steps. I think there's also a challenge that a lot of leaders, especially in my area of digital products and experiences, where you're a user of technology, but you're not a provider of that technology. You don't know how it comes to fruition. You might have a general sense of it, so you don't understand the complexities or the interdependencies that are necessary there. And so there's a lot of information out there, like there is in a lot of spaces, which is just noise. And the reality of it is they go, well, we'll be agile, or we'll do it this way, or whatever the thing may be. Mm-hmm. And they don't realize that what they're really doing is they're trying to skip steps. And if there was a faster, better way to do it, that would be the way everybody would do it, right? There's a reason why the steps exist, because it's been proven time and time again. And so making sure that you understand that impact, and then making sure that there's clear understanding of the steps and how that you aren't setting yourself up basically for internal sabotage is critical. And we found in not only our own work, but over the last 2 years, in researching my book, as an example, one of the key themes that we really focused on talking to product leaders and business leaders all over the country at businesses of all sizes, those who are the most successful, that are outperforming above and beyond the averages in their industry, they understand the importance of doing those steps because it's accelerating team performance and the outcomes. They don't get focused on deliverables. They get focused on outcomes and making impact. And when they can focus on that conversation, it shifts how you start the work to begin with. And when executives and leaders can understand that, they're empowering their teams to do incredible things versus focusing on just outputs.
Yeah. So maybe final question on goals and direction. As CEO of Emerge Interactive, how do you set out goals and then make sure that there is clear direction for getting there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think every business at different sizes has different tools. We really focus on a couple of things. We have a very clear 7-year vision for our company, and we break that down into very clearly defined work streams of what is going to take to achieve that. And we come down from 7 years to 3 years. So if you're familiar with Jim Collins and the BHAG and Good to
Right.
Great. He talks about that. That's our 7-year target, and then we focus on a 3HAG. What's that intermittent major step? That's tangible.
Mhm.
The long term is aspirational. The midterm is something that we can tangibly see in front of us now. We know exactly what we're going to need to do to get there. And then what we do is we develop very, very clear work streams on what is going to take and making sure that those impacts are going to move the organization forward. And sometimes we are proven wrong and we need to make adjustments and pivot. We can't, we don't have a crystal ball that sees where the world is going to go. But that allows us to have really proactive, continuous conversations on making sure that we are moving forward. And that is the number one goal, that we can move forward cohesively as a company, as a team that really looks after its employees and cares deeply about them, and at the same time continuing that's the quality of service and delivery for our clients. So all of those things have to be moving together, and so we're very intentional about how we manage that and bring that into the forefront, and are very transparent with our team about what those things are and when they need to be done by, so we have accountability.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, none of us had a crystal ball about how 2020 was going to go. But even with all of this, the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal, probably doesn't change. That's looking far enough out into the future where the BHAG is the same, but now direction for all of us has changed because of the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think our vision for our company, our long term, hasn't changed at all. How we're going to get there with the way 2020 has gone is definitely evolving. There's no question about it. The needs of our clients are evolving, on a daily basis. It feels like right now still. So being able to be, I think there's I'm not going to get it exactly right, but there's a quote that approximately Jeff Bezos from Amazon, says, we're going to be stubborn on vision, but flexible on our approach or process. And so, that idea or that concept is something that I've seen to be really ring true for all types of organizations at any size. Is you need to be really clear and be diligent and stay the course on your vision, but know that you're going to have to keep adjusting on how you're going to get there, and be adaptable and resilient, which everybody is being forced to do right now.
Yeah, well, that's great advice, and again, we encourage resiliency in the face of mistakes, of learning and evolving and continuing to move forward. So I really like the way you articulated that. Again, our guest is Jonathon Hensley, CEO of Emerge Interactive. So let's come back to the book. Maybe at one point, was that a big, hairy, audacious goal of writing a book? Or I'm curious, as an author, I always like to know the origin story of what leads someone to go through all of the effort that it takes to do a book.
Yeah, it definitely was a big, hairy, audacious goal. I have, learned and made a lot of mistakes, in writing a book. But what I found is the power of writing a book is the ability to crystallize and articulate critical thinking that some of it I had institutionalized from 20 plus years of work.
Right.
Some of it really forced me to redefine or codify how I think about certain things, and I have found it to be an incredibly inspiring and positive process. And for me, being able to interview and connect with so many amazing people through the process was probably one of the biggest highlights of writing the book. So it's been a lot of fun, but a major task for sure.
Yeah. And so the title is Alignment. Do you have a subtitle lined up?
Yeah, it's
a little more.
The book is Alignment, and it's the one thing that all successful digital products have in common.
Ah. So who in your mind is the target audience for the book? Who do you expect to be reading it, and why?
Yeah. So there's two major audiences for the book. One are business executives, leaders. There is a whole section in the book where we really talk about the new skills of leadership that are necessary for digital leaders. And as organizations are focused on digital transformation, websites are becoming the front door for many organizations as they go forward. And no longer are the websites about brochureware. They're literally part of how they deliver their products and services their customers. So there's some really critical stuff in there that we're hoping leaders really dive into, and that we have seen from some of the best are really leading forward and from the front today. The second group is product owners. So product owners can sit in any facet of the organization, but if you're a digital product owner, whether it be a website, a mobile app, an internal business tool, there is critical insight and information that you need to have to be successful in driving the outcomes you want for your product and enabling your organization to thrive. And so we've really focused on those two audiences for the book, and really hoping that we can add a lot of value to their work.
Yeah. Well, good luck with the launch of the book. It'll be out this fall. Can people learn more? I know they can learn more about your company, but also the book. Do you have a website that you would share for people?
We do. So if you go to emergeinteractive.com/podcast, what we're offering for the guests on the show today is anybody who would like to pre-register, I will send a free digital copy of the book when it launches this fall, and they can get that. And there's a little bit of additional information about the book and what's coming there.
All right. Well, thank you for offering that. Emergeinteractive.com/podcast. So make sure everyone check that out. I'll put that link in the show notes so everyone can find that. They can learn more about the book, and they can learn more about you, Jonathon. So again, as we wrap up here, our guest has been Jonathon Hensley, CEO of Emerge Interactive, and his book coming out real soon, Alignment. Jonathon, thank you. Thank you so much for being a guest and for talking about that, and for being willing to share and reflect upon mistakes. I really, really appreciate that. It's not easy to do, so thank you.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Mark.